My name is Sam Jenks, and welcome to another episode of The Way We Source, a podcast hosted by Kodiak Hub, where we share our talks with procurement practitioners, leaders, experts, consultants, content gurus, and people that we find downright inspiring, diving into the role that sourcing and procurement plays in the way we live. If you like today's episode, make sure to rate the program and give us a follow. Today, it's all things technology, process, and excellence in procurement. Today's guest is on a mission to empower organizations to drive best process value with a digital mindset and culture tailored to their business context and domain. Our guest today doesn't just talk the talk, but they've also walked the walk as a champion and driver of change, working in businesses such as Alstom, SAB Miller, and most recently served as the Global Center of Excellence Innovation Lead at Takeda. During the past 2 years, he's branched out on his own to found and become the senior advisor at AccelerIQ GmbH. We're happy to have him joining us today, Pedro Berrocoso. Pedro, welcome to the show.
Thanks for welcoming me and the introduction you just gave about me and kind of my career track. So thank you very much for that, Sam. I'm really excited to be here with you at this podcast.
Well, we're happy to have you. And I mean, you've had quite a significant career within the space of procurement and supply chain. What does it mean to you, this space of sourcing and procurement?
Well, it's a passion field for me, to be very honest. And from that perspective, it's hard to just get a sentence out to encompass all what I feel about when I think about this particular field of expertise. But, sourcing and procurement, in my perspective, is really at the intersection of entrepreneurial activities within a business, right? It's about strategic cost management. And at the same time, it's about building as well the right level of partnerships across an ecosystem of suppliers, vendors, but as well internal stakeholders to really elevate up the ability of a business to reach their goals. And with that, have as well an opportunity through, not just run the business faster or better, but as well prepare for the growth plan ahead by having sourcing and procurement supporting these goals, right? So from my perspective, it's really at the intersection of everything, but at the same time, a good detector as well of trends, which are happening in the market, which you can then potentially as well scout and then bring into an organization as well to test out and potentially change business model. And at the same time, it's as well a good detector of the culture which is going on within an organization. Organizations which really have good sourcing and procurement practices usually have as well a good culture of collaborating and thinking as well enterprise-wide when it comes to achieving goals.
I think that's a fantastic intro to the role. And obviously you're excited about the space and have been in it for a long time. You've been in it for 30 plus years. I mean, what still gets you excited? Obviously, you mentioned there that it's an entrepreneurial role, which I can agree with you. And I think that we've had some other guests that resonate on that topic. But I mean, what gets you up out of bed in the morning, right? And still getting you excited within the space?
And to be honest, there's never been a dull moment, right? In my career within sourcing/procurement, there's always been evolution. And this is what really gets me out of bed every day. There's always evolving tech. There are process problems to be solved. There is as well a lot of good people to connect. So from my perspective, it's this variety of possibilities to really make a big impact within organizations, which truly matters to me and really excites me. So, when 10 years ago, we were talking more about how do we make strategic sourcing work, potentially shared services. Now we're talking about how do we build with all of the data which we have within procurement, really an intelligence which can help the organization really to understand better and predict better as well outcomes, potentially as well out of that learn, and then have as well better strategies in place to work with suppliers and as well with the internal stakeholders, right? So really having this variety is something which always gets me out of bed every single day, but as well that connection between processes, technology, and then the people which I'm working with is really something I honor a lot.
Working in excellence and centers of excellence and focus on technology and process throughout your career. I know that you work with not only emerging technologies, but you have seen a lot of emerging technologies. Yeah. AI is on the tip of everybody's tongue at the moment, right? I'm just curious, hearing from your side, how do we avoid this impending AI apathy that's coming towards us all if it just is more so a brand of AI rather than an application?
Yeah, and this is a pertinent question, particularly now, after having now probably lived through a cycle of 2 years, 3 years that everything is AI'd, right? And
Yeah.
if you talk within procurement to people who are focused on category management or procurement, like transactional procurement activities, and you mention AI, what you get is a sigh, right? Because everyone talks about it, but there's hardly a demonstration. So from my perspective, an important aspect to get out of that apathy is to be able to make it tangible to people what it really means, right? And that means that you will have a need to connect the way you want to be using AI within procurement to your business goals and really demonstrate with showcases, potentially with first examples, what that's going to look like. So, for instance, have an ability to predict your spend patterns with the help of an AI solution could obviously spur as well some thoughts about how you will then be differing your procurement strategies, right? And really demonstrating this, giving people hands-on ability to play with it, and then role modeling alongside with potentially an executive taking that role of an igniter of change is something which can take people out of that apathy. So make it really personal, but as well connected to the business goals.
100%, and I think that that's very, very important, that it's tangible for people. Beyond you said there, patterns of spend, which I think can be very tangible. Obviously, one of the greatest KPIs that procurement and sourcing is still measured on is obviously savings, right? And being able to control spend. How are some of the other ways that AI can really elevate processes or alike within the role of sourcing and procurement? Is there specific areas that you see the application of this technology making the biggest impacts?
Well, there's a lot of different areas, and AI in itself is not just one single solution, as we all know, right? There's different types of approaches, different types of technologies, which are all under this umbrella of AI. And the simplest way to go about demonstrable use cases is thinking about automation of let's say repetitive tasks, which are taking place all the time, right? And there's the classical activities which you can potentially think of, which are more in the space of transactional work. So, for instance, supply onboarding activities, which take a long time, master data setups. You have the classical conversion of purchase requisitions into PO. Wherever you have manual or very repetitive tasks, that's where automation can play a role. Now, coming back to AI, because sometimes there is this difference between what is actually automation versus AI, there is within the space of machine learning a lot of capabilities with the data you have to think through and actually train the machine to identify patterns, which will help you then, for instance, with the classification of spend, help you potentially with the classification of images when you're looking at quality issues with your suppliers, for instance, and learn from this data points or actually translate from this data points actions which you may need to take. So just to give you a very specific example, I worked on last year with one of the companies I was actually engaged with. There we actually did exactly that. So we looked at the supplier quality aspects. We identified that through the images we were getting back from the reports of non-conformance, we were having similar patterns of let's say, pollutions in the products, right? So that helped us then to shape up a continuous improvement program, which then eliminated, together with the supplier, some of these impurities which we were seeing in the product, right? Another use case could be, companies which audit suppliers and then want to be having a track record of that in their records. So if you do supplier audits all the time, that means you have a lot of paper to go through. So using AI to help you scan through vast amount of information is another area which is really giving you a possibility to experience and experiment with AI and see then as well that you can draw some insights, some conclusions faster than you were able to do before and better than potentially a human could do.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things that you hit on there. But one of the things that I think that I would like to extract, and for our listeners, maybe some of those that want to learn more about the applications of AI technologies, like you said, they differ within the path and that you're looking to apply those. Can you quickly just explain for our listeners the difference between structured and unstructured data? Because you gave two examples there that used both.
Yeah, so if we think about the unstructured data to be data which sits in documents, for instance, sits in images, sits in audio, video, etc., it's all having a structure which is not necessarily following a pattern, right? So it's not in a table, it's not easily digestible by a machine. So this is where classically you'll have images, as I was just mentioning, pictures, potentially an audio file, which you want to then ingest via AI to translate, transcript, and then after that be able to make sense out of that for a machine then to draw patterns, for a machine then to structure it, and with that be able to provide you back some insights or use the information to transact in a system. Whereas when you're talking about structured information, it's usually already system organized, if you want, right? Yeah. It's many times coming out of an application already. It is parts of logs. It's part as well of documents which follow a very strict pattern. So it's very easy for you then to draw out of the table and the information which you have stored the details further for execution, right? So that's where I would be classifying structured versus unstructured data in a nutshell.
Very well described. Thank you so much. And I mean, on this path, I think that, one of the things we try and do on these episodes is always to inspire and educate, right? And I'm sure that you meet a lot of businesses at various levels of maturity. Some people already have fully rolled out, kind of tech stacks within their organizations, are having vast applications of AI and alike. When you meet these businesses with varied, kind of levels of maturity, where are procurement teams typically mature, but also where are the areas that they need to work on more?
Yeah, and we need to generalize now a bit because basically meeting up different companies, you'll get a sense that there are probably two camps, right? There's the camp of companies who've already been on their journey of sourcing and procurement maturity for a longer period of time. There you'll encounter exactly what you said. You'll encounter people who have already got a sourcing and procurement organization which is well accepted, right? With a underpinning of processes, you have technology stacks where the question is more about how do I make this now better work? How do I modernize? How do I layer in new emerging technologies such as automation and AI to draw insights and build that intelligence, which makes it so much important as well, which makes it so critical as well for you then to deliver better business inputs, right? On the other hand, you have these organizations which have all of that as well, but what they lack is the change part, right? So you have organizations where you come in and you'll see that they have all the tools you can imagine. They've got sourcing tools, contract tools, they've got P2P engines, right? They've got the whole stack, but what they lack is the fundament. They lack structured processes, they lack harmonized activities, they do lack business enablement and concept, which then fuel, obviously, the activities which you want to then take forward within sourcing and procurement. But what they generally all do well by now, I think, is the strategic sourcing aspects. I think people have realized there is a procurement part which is rather operational and that is transactional, and there's the part which is around strategic sourcing. I think by now most companies do that part really well. Where there's still a lot to do is really extract the value out of processes and tech, and at the same time be making sure that the changes which you have in mind, they get adopted, and you have with that as well an ability to really transform the organization in and outside of procurement, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very well put. And in those two camps, I mean, how do we start bridging the gap? How do we make sure that, those that, as you described, have things in place, but don't maybe have the alignment across their tech stack and their processes to close the gap for those that are kind of those more mature organizations?
Yeah, and I think the question is a bit individual by company, right? Because most companies will have a specific problem set, right, which you need to sort. But I think what is important is that you paint the picture as well in terms of the vision you want to be achieving with a company, right? So very early on, first conversation will always be about what exactly is going on within your field, but then as well, what is it you actually want to achieve? So discussing that North Star within procurement is really, really important, because that then draws as well underneath that all of the enablers as well, which will need to follow along to support it, right? So having that clear view of the North Star you want to be achieving, that goal which you want to be enabling with processes, with technology, with people, is really crucial to start with. Then after that, I mean, you'll have a piece of work around assessment to do. You'll then have to draw the opportunities you want to work on, and then prioritize. Because many times what you have as well is a lengthier time need in order for you then to fully address all of the points. So you need to prioritize with the capacity you have in mind.
Very good insights. Now you're talking my language, of course, right? That's very tech language of talking the North Star metric.
Yeah.
Do you believe that it would be useful for procurement teams to sit down and say, what is my North Star metric? And if so, how does a team develop that?
So I think it's crucial to have a North Star view, which connects to your procurement strategy, which then again connects to the enterprise strategy. One way I saw this actually being elaborated, just to give you a concrete example, was an exercise called line of sight, right? Which basically was putting out there the ultimate goal you want to be achieving for the company as part of your organizational strategy. And then out of that, have every individual team work out what are the components that are contributing to that overall North Star, right? This was called the line of sight, something which I learned in one of my last companies, which was tremendously powerful because that put out to you a kind of a process where you had to think backwards, from where you wanted to get to all of the components which you had to provide over your dependencies so that you could actually support it, right? So this is just to give you one concrete example on how you can achieve this. But, I think North Starring your journey is important. You have as well to keep in mind, though, that there is obviously during the journey as well some checks you need to do in order to adapt your path in case there's fundamental changes or there's actually new influences coming in, which you need to then as well consider for your journey there to take place, right?
Yeah. Great insights. And I mean, some businesses utilize an OKR framework that would be similar, right? Working towards the objectives, key results, and the initiatives that are aligned. Yeah. The line of sight sounds like a great exercise as well, but it's rooted within that North Star, right? Understanding what's the business strategy, what's the procurement strategy, what is the North Star based upon those things. Very good insights. I mean, for our listeners that don't know, let's take a step back here. I apologize. We haven't even spoken about your business, AccelerIQ. Obviously, you're giving us a good glimpse into the type of advisory services that you provide. But what's your approach to advisement?
Well, I founded this business with an understanding that the way I was actually seeing projects being run, for me, were missing kind of that tailored aspect to really contextualize the work which you were doing to the business problems, right? So I saw many consultancies, and I've been a consultant in the past myself, right? Taking a very generic approach. And at the end, when you were then looking at the deliverables, you're kind of wondering, but how does that all fit in with customers, right? So for me, one of the things which I'm very much focused on is ensuring that when I engage with a company on their procurement strategy, on their procurement transformation, potentially the review of what they have in place within digital or data, that we contextualize this into a package of deliverables, which is really practical then to be taken forward into implementation. So one of my key methodologies I use is called ESWARA, which is a methodology which centers around the way you can actually lift off process improvements by looking at them through different angles of levers, right? And not just solely jumping first into a solution, which the customer may have in mind, but guiding them through this understanding that in order to solve a problem, you first have to understand the root of it, but then go through different levers and understand then how you can best address the problem by finding a solution which suits you best. And that could be a process improvement solution. It could be just reducing activities. It could as well be automation. It could as well be AI, but it could as well just be classical reorganizational topics, right? So it's really, really important that, from my perspective, that in these conversations, you help as well customers to understand how to solve things without jumping to conclusions already at the start.
Fantastic insight there. You obviously are kind of taking people along on a journey, it sounds like, in a lot of the advisement that you're doing. And as an advisor, obviously, we talked about it before, you step into businesses with a lot of different levels of maturity. I know that we spoke offline that digital literacy is one of those big topics for you within procurement teams. How do you believe that a procurement organization best creates a culture and or further develops upon a culture of digital literacy?
Yeah, and so digital literacy can be very small and can be very big, right? I think what's important, again, just coming back to this discussion about purpose, is what is it you want to achieve with that literacy? And from my perspective, you think about 2024, which is the year we're currently in, it's absolutely indispensable that everyone in an organization is digital literate to a certain level, right? I'm not saying that everyone needs to be an expert in coding or an expert in AI or an expert in X solutions, but what everyone needs to have is this awareness of, what does actually digital technology offer? What's the mindset you need in order to approach this? And how do you then employ that within your own space of work? So from my perspective, thinking about digital literacy as a core competency with an organization, which is kind of integrated into the competency framework of your team has to enable people to really be working smarter, working with tools hand in hand, and at the same time be able as well to work with a data-driven mindset as well, so that they can really get the best out of current modern ways of working, and at the same time can elevate their own proficiency for the next roles moving forward. So it's absolutely indispensable for the future procurement person to be digital literate, and building a program around that will mean that you have to think about how you add on to their particular curriculum or learning path or career path competencies which help them to step up. This could be a program which really centers more around the fact that you have learnings, right? There could be e-learnings. There could be many different capabilities you can kind of draw from online, but as well on-site academies. But then there's as well this aspect where you want to be really making sure that people get hands-on, right? And so, a few examples just to give you some. In some companies, you go about doing academies, right, where people can actually join and get a certificate for digital literacy, if you want, by passing through a staged course. In other circumstances, like a program I've been running as well in the past, you want to not just have people learn, you want to as well have people experience. So, right. I was building a program which was called the Automation Ninja program, right, as part of my last adventure, if you want, right? And in there, what I was really strongly focusing on is bringing everyone along the journey in cohorts to not just learn classically about digital tools, right? And in this case, it was more centered around RPA and automation, but how they could actually, in that course, think through and ideate what could be areas within their own space where automation could make a difference, be able to describe the problem properly and build a business case, and then move that then into a tangible use case, which they were then taught to build, right? So immediately what you then have is people connecting the hearts and the minds, and are able then with that to anchor their learnings with a tangible use case they can bring back and demonstrate to others.
Yeah, because otherwise it becomes so immaterial, right? It needs to be tangible, and it needs to be rooted in something that I think that you could be able to take forward. And I think that's a great way of being able to forward literacy is empowering people, to get creative and understand it from their own position, right? And that's so important, because that's something that I think is missed very often as well. I mean, you've seen multiple eras of kind of, procurement technology and development throughout your career. I'm curious, can you break it down for me? I mean, you mentioned before, kind of strategic sourcing was the thing that everybody was trying to get in place, and they made that happen. And now they've moved on, I think, to other topics. Have you seen that same transition within the area of technology in procurement and sourcing? And if so, can you break it down into some distinct areas or eras?
Yeah, I think it's very much an analogy, right? There are different areas. As procurement obviously matures, the same happens on the technology side. And by the way, it's very hard to distinguish now what is the driver, right? Because a lot of the evolution nowadays is coming from the technology side, right? So a lot of what you currently see maturing as well on the side of procurement in general is as well pushed or ignited by some availability of new technologies as well, right? But just looking back a bit into history and doing a little bit of archaeology with you, if you want, the three areas I would distinguish. The first area was more centered around bringing all these manual processes and digitalizing them, so bringing them into systems. And this was more centered around the ERP systems at the time. So if I'm talking about the 90s, this was where the big push happened to bring procurement into requisitioning activities, right? And to be honest, one example very early in my career was just having on your mainframe a black screen solution, the ability to type in your requisition and then have that routed to procurement, so that procurement, which was then built as an initial function, was having an ability to get visibility over what was going on in the business. So very basic stuff, right? Yeah. So this first area was really about moving, let's say, manual activities and very intransparent situations into ERP systems. And with that, connecting these flows of activities, very transactional flow of activities, with your financial activities as well in the ERPs, right? The second area was then really forming up what we probably now want to call strategic procurement, right? Which is giving the procurement folks the ability to really do their work, not from a transactional perspective, because that was kind of... or this is in itself an own field, but having the ability really to have spend analytics in place, having sourcing solutions, contract solutions, and with that, give all the tools and capabilities to the procurement folks to do their job better, right? So that is area number 2. So it was really centered around strategic sourcing, and obviously a continuation of everything which was started with the internet at the time, which included collaboration and connection to suppliers, which was happening as well at the same time, right? So,
which is a given today, right?
Which is absolutely given today, which is mesmerizing to me because it took a long while, right? And right. To be honest, even 10 years ago, no, actually not 10, I think 6 years ago, in one of my projects, we're still having situations where suppliers were apparently not having email addresses, right? Which sometimes cracks me up, but I'm kind of thinking, well, it might differ in terms of culture, right?
Yeah.
But so area number 2 was more about giving strategic sourcing a push by really enabling tools and capabilities for the procurement folks. But then as well, all that connectivity with suppliers taking place. The last step, which is kind of a mix between integrated source to pay, and on top of that now, the last few years, more about digital and AI, has been really to build a runway for procurement, but as well the stakeholders to work together collaboratively in a more effective manner, right? And that means tools with a better user experience, having automation and effective checks and controls included, having as well efficiency just out of the basis there, and having the ability as well to continuously improve the processes which you have with the data which you see arriving, right? So from that perspective, that last area for me is almost the digital procurement age, right?
Right.
And within that space, there's all of the great things which we talk about all the time, which are the end-to-end process activities, so sourcing, contract, and as well the supplier relationship management activities connected to your transactional systems, but actually enabled on top of that with a lot of intelligence, which now can be given through automation and AI.
Very distinctly put, kind of that initial, the birth of the ERP and the first wave of digitized procurement, transactional, strategic sourcing, focus on collaboration, right? And then into the era of digital procurement. Okay. What's the next era to come? Let's look inside that crystal ball. What do you think is kind of the next era that's upon us?
And that's it. That crystal ball moment is something which we already need to start thinking ahead, right? Or is actually almost there already. And I think we were talking about intelligence now for a moment. So I think that you will have now 2 strong pillars in any technology stack, in any procurement, digital procurement landscape. Right. One of them is really going to center about all of the digital enablers, which includes application. It includes as well all of your digital tools, like for instance your OCRs, your NLPs, and everything which AI can offer to you. But on the other hand, you'll have as well data as a foundation, and with that, the ability to connect these 2 things for it to produce for you more insights, a better view as well into sustainability and how you can meet potentially sustainability targets by understanding how you transact, but then as well how you can then actually extract from the data as well, better recommendations for the business to go about certain aspects, right? So having that data and digital layer next to each other and really make that work together, I think that's one of the things which I see companies now thriving forward, and which I think will determine the next few months and potentially years. One other big aspect and one other big discussion points is this whole agentic AI discussion, right? So everyone talks about agentic AI. So having the ability now to move away from clickety-click screens by having an agent you can actually address, giving them a task and having that being executed automatically. That includes autonomous sourcing activities where you have bots going about, let's say, tactical and tail spend, and with that taking decision by themselves within given guardrails, right? This is one of the big discussion points right now. And the other thing happens as well on the procurement side. So take away some of the procurement activities, have them supported by, not necessarily just done by an agent, and then coming back to procurement folks with decision points so that there is actually that collaboration happening and decisions being made with sound reason, right? So I think that's going to be keeping us busy for a while to unpick. I think we're seeing early signs of what autonomous could mean, but there's a lot of things to get right to really get there. So I've been thinking that for quite a bit of time. We'll see this collaboration between human and AI taking place. The humans will, on one hand, really start focusing more on the strategic side of the procurement activities, more focus on partnering, more focus on supplier relationships and getting as well that right. Whereas on the other hand, you'll have a lot of the activities, the day-to-day activities supported by technology, potentially as well with agents in one or some of the processes which you want to be focusing on.
All right. Well, that's you heard it here first, right? Pedro Berrocoso's view inside his crystal ball. So thank you for sharing that as well. I can agree with the elements that you mentioned as well, and we see those trends as well in the market. Let's see if those applications can be able to be taken forward into real material, and tangible applications in the business. I think that one of the levers that you can pull to be able to make these things reality is obviously having centers of excellence with bright minds like yourself working a process in digital. I'm curious, how does one even start going about building out a center of excellence? And a world-class center of excellence is obviously the goal. But how do you even go about starting one in the first place?
Yeah, and it all starts with the question: what is the center of excellence about? Right? What's the purpose of that center of excellence which you want to build? And having that deep understanding of, what is it? What is the role within procurement, or what's the role within the enterprise for that center of excellence is really important, right? So the first thing to do is really determine what type of center of excellence you're actually running. There are types of center of excellence which are more focused on knowledge sharing. So they're amassing information, they're researching, they're potentially then contextualizing and sharing that back out to let's say the other teams which want to benefit from that. Classical ones could be compliance or risk related centers of excellence, or market analytics type of activities, right? Where what you do is really offer out your service by having obviously a team of experts centralized somewhere which really focus themselves on a key topic, right? But the more, let's say, prevalent model of centers of excellence is actually bringing together, on one hand, expertise, but it's bringing together as well methodologies and processes, potentially as well tools, to really work on behalf of an organization to help them actually extract the best value out of a given topic. And that could be, in the space of automation, like I was just mentioning before, a digital innovation center of excellence, which has really got the focus to ensure that not only is there knowledge about how to go about automation, but there's as well a vetted process which helps you identify the opportunities which make most sense and have the biggest impact for the priorities the teams within procurement or the teams within finance will want to achieve, right? So, and that second prevalent model will require certain fundamental readiness factors in order to be effective, right? And one of the factors is obviously to be core aligned as well with the business strategy and as well with the objectives you have. And that means, not being an isolated center of excellence team, but having that connection really as well through common goals, which will help you then as well to advance, right? That includes having a model in place where your structure has got the right skill sets. So, for instance, if you're taking the example which I was just mentioning before, you've got specialized people which understand process, they understand technology. They do as well have a component of change included, because working with stakeholders, you need that ability to engage with other people as well.
Sure.
And then as well that resilience as well to come from a startup mode up to a growth mode where you can really scale with the folks you have in there, and a model which helps you then as well over time to grow your competencies as well, right?
Yeah, and that's a fantastic kind of foundation for how those organizations work. And just as well as I do, change doesn't happen on its own, right? We need strong stakeholders to champion this in a business, obviously. Otherwise, the center of excellence sits with on its own planet as its own little silo. It has to be connected to the business, as you mentioned, right? How do you go about building those champions in a business? Whether it's for new process or technology, and then also on the backside of that, what are some of the greatest barriers to building champions?
Yeah, and I think building champions really starts with having an investment as well into people to make them part of your journey, right? So if I'm just talking again about that center of excellence, which we were just describing. So when I was heading the automation center of excellence or digital innovation center of excellence in my last company I was working with, one of the big thing was at the very beginning to identify these key people out there in the different departments, in the different procurement teams as well, who were going to be curious enough, right, to invest some of their time with us and learn with us as we were going about the journey, right? So the first thing really starts with identifying these support folks which you have out there, and there's usually some key user type of folks, or nowadays as well within the younger generation, you have a lot of digital savvy people who are just curious and interested as well to contribute to change, right? So picking these people is the first thing. But second to that, if you think about the program I was just describing earlier around literacy, building up their skill set as well so that they can go back with demonstrable change, right? And they can actually then evangelize for you within the function what you're actually enticing to do. And that really means enabling them with the skills, enabling them potentially with collaterals, enabling them as well with a use case they build themselves, right? So that they can really as well passionately talk about what you do in the center of excellence. And with that, almost like act as a snowball, right? And bring in other people across the change, right? And now, look, talking about barriers, I mean, the usual barriers would be about resistance to change, right? So making people conduits to that change means making them participate on the change and having them understand what's in for them as well, right? So having that layout as well and clarity about what the change will entail for individuals and having the champions helping as well disseminate that thought is where you can eliminate some of the barriers. Of course, you need to as well watch out a little bit, because there may not just be team members who are resistant. You may have as well middle management, and even if you have the top layer of your leadership team all supporting you, you really need to address everyone in the organization with a clarity on what is the benefits for the enterprise in total, but then as well for the individual departments and people, right? So really bring back the change into something tangible for people and the enterprise.
And that's a fantastic tip, right? Is not to forget the individuals, that will be driving forward the change. I love also this approach of almost a word of mouth, aspect on making change happen and making it stick, right? Because it's important that people believe in things, and what's the easiest way to believe in something is to ensure that your neighbor is also believing in it, right?
Absolutely, and it's not just top down, right? Which is probably one of the biggest pushers for change, if you want, right?
Yeah.
But it has to be as well bottom up, right? And this is why I strongly believe that you have a grassroots level of adoption needed as well, and collaboration across teams in order to anchor change. So it cannot just be enforced; it really has to be felt, lived, and as well believed in, right?
100%. There's actually a topic that I've discussed, with many of other procure tech execs and also founders as well. In procurement technology, the space that we're in at Kodiak, we haven't really seen that first wave, I would say, of product-led growth of a SaaS business, right? It's primarily still sales-led motions, where obviously it's more enterprise solutions. It's top-down decisions typically that we are going to implement a solution based upon a strategy. I'm curious, is there ever going to be a future where PLG works, this kind of product-led growth, where from a grassroots level, a procurement user is going to be able to go out, find a solution, try a solution, show it to middle management, and it moves upwards?
So you bring your own solution type of model, right?
Yeah, I'm just trying to pick your brains, because obviously you've seen plenty of top-down projects, right? Yeah. I'm curious, do you ever think that there's truly going to be applications of technology from the bottom up, or will it just never work in procurement? Because it's worked in so many other segments, right? FinTech, MarTech.
It's a really good question, just considering a bit the type of applications which are getting used in procurement. So if you're talking about AI tools, right, there's so many which are coming now in via the consumer route into organizations and actually are getting then reviewed as, is this something we want to do at enterprise level rather than at the individual level? So I think classically that's already happening now, but that's not procurement centric, right? If we're thinking about procurement centric solutions, yeah, that's really an interesting thought. And I haven't yet seen a lot of freemium models. And then after that, you get into full subscription and these type of product-led growth approaches. I believe that still, probably because procurement is procurement, right? And you have to vet through a model which goes with an RFP, I think what you classically still see are these business applications which get actually bought and then installed, right? Rather than trialed out and then actually extended. So, I would wish there could be more product-led growth. I haven't just seen much. Now, is there a future for this? I think there definitely is. And there are more and more companies which want to go much more agile about technology. They don't want to buy these large stacks and then hang around with them and figure out that, they don't quite fit with your requirements. So there's more of this thought now coming into the organizations that you need to be more nimble when you choose, right? Maybe have a period of trial, maybe have with that as well an ability to fully experiment and test before you then commit to a solution, right? So that's the part I'm currently seeing. Now, is that in a stage model from a product-led growth perspective really similar to what we see in MarTech? I'm not sure. But I think I see more and more interest to have that type of agility when it comes to technology choices, and then looking at as well at the response of your user base, which I think has been many times neglected when you make solution evaluations, right? So I think that's becoming much more important now that you do have that vetting as well through your community, and as well with that an ability then as well to have anchored as well from that perspective solutions which really make life easier, not just for yourself, right, as kind of the enterprise decision maker, but as well the users which are then going to utilize.
And it goes back to the topic that you mentioned, at the beginning of your response. Obviously, we have such an abundance of great user experiences and user interfaces in our consumer life. We can't forget about the user, even if it is in the case of a business-wide application decision, right? And I think that poses a very interesting question. Like, is this next wave, this next era of procurement technology, is it maybe the era of user centricity, right? We'll see. I think that it's a question that maybe we can rub our crystal ball and figure out for ourselves in the future.
I like that question. I think it's actually quite a critical one to start thinking. Well, not start thinking about. I think most companies are already understanding that what failed them in the past was actually having solutions which were, from a user centricity perspective, not really fitting the bill, right? So I believe that this is one of the areas where, just coming back to your crystal ball discussion before, is actually keeping people quite on the toes right now in order to get it right and really anchor some of the change they want to do within the procurement and sourcing space as well. And for instance, embed the stakeholders better into the process, right?
Very well put. I could talk to you all day, Pedro. Unfortunately, we need to start rounding out. And it was fantastic to have you on to be able to share your insights with our listeners. I hope that everyone was able to take something away. I know that I was from this episode as well. Your experience in obviously, process, digital, and excellence is astounding. And I would love if I were a practitioner that you would come and advise my business. So thank you so much for sharing your insights. Before we let you go, I have a few quick fire questions for you. One word or one sentence answers is what I want from you, Pedro. Does that sound like a plan?
Let's do that.
All right, fantastic. First one, is there a particular book or a podcast that you would suggest to those out there that are listening in? It can be either professional or personal.
Well, I would maybe pick two. One of them is The Only Constant from a friend of mine here, which is he's called Lacerindum. So listen to The Only Constant. He talks and muses about technology and kind of in a more philosophical way. So really a podcast worth listening. There's been some great people there. I've been there as well. But to be honest, I just like this mix between kind of spiritualism and as well a bit more rounded view on how technology is really making change within our current society and as well businesses, right? So this is one, which is The Only Constant, which I really like. I think everyone likes Lex Friedman's podcast, right? I really like that one as well. So if you want to have a diversity of viewpoints and listen into as well some of the actual things happening within politics, potentially as well society and technology, this is a fantastic podcast as well, which I would recommend you as well to listen. And if you're in a German-based country like I am, right, a great podcast is The State of Process Automation, which is run by a friend of mine called Christoph Bacher. It's in German, so it's not for everyone, but it's a fantastic podcast for anyone who's interested to really hear the latest of experiences which companies share on that podcast within relation to process automation and AI.
Last one, all expenses paid trip. You're heading out. You can go by yourself. You could take your family. Where are you going tomorrow?
Well, we have this big family idea that we want to go to Japan, right? I've spent considerable time traveling to and from Japan backwards as part of one of my last business roles. It's been a place which is very close to my heart. I love the culture. I love almost everything about the country itself. So this mix really between tradition and futuristic way of living. And so one of these bucket list items I have with my family is to get them there within the next 12 months. So I'd be hoping that I can travel there and experience, the uniqueness of the country together with them and really show them some of the places which I really cherish a lot.
I hope that for you as well. I hope that for me, to be completely honest. Okay, I have to ask then one more question because I'm of course interested in traveling to Japan myself. One city that you would recommend you have to go to in Japan that's maybe not Tokyo, and one dish that you have to eat.
In Japan?
Yes.
Or where?
Yes, in Japan.
Well, yeah, well, cities, I mean, of course, there's Kyoto, right, which is where a lot of the, let's say, heritage is still located. And it used to be at a certain stage as well, the capital of Japan. So you can't miss Kyoto out of the map, right?
Cool.
If you want to really go to something a bit smaller, a bit more off the beaten track, I think, so from my perspective, Nikko would be a really nice place, which has got nice temples. It's a little bit elevated up in the mountain. It's a fantastic scenery which you get there. So that would be a second place I would recommend. But I think in that mix, you get already a lot. Now, if you're thinking about food, and I mean, we could talk all day long about that, but one which I found quite intriguing is okonomiyaki, right? Which is one dish which they have in Japan as well, which is, I think it's called the Osaka pizza or something like that, right? Which is shredded cabbage layered with different vegetables, etc. Right? So it's quite a scenery as well when you do it. So it's quite interesting as well to see how it's actually assembled in front of you, and it's got a special taste. So I kind of like that as well.
I'm looking at flights now, directly following this recording. Thank you so much, Pedro, for coming on and just being a fantastic guest. If people want to, get in touch with you, learn more about what you guys are doing at AccelerIQ, maybe, look at your services as well, what's the best way to be able to do so?
Well, you can reach me by direct messaging me on LinkedIn. That's one possibility you have. I'm running as well a small blog, so you can as well, obviously, through the blog, reach me. From that perspective, these are the two channels I would recommend you to get a start with, and we can take it from there.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you, Pedro, for coming on, and please reach out to Pedro if you're looking for some support.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the time.